So, this story is our greatest tragedy, our desire to define good and evil on our own terms. The Bible is filled with incredible stories with profound meaning. So, stories like fairy tales and fables have a way of distilling complex life lessons so that children can grasp the lesson. So, I think it was Tom Holland who said of Jesus, Jesus is the king of similes. So, Jesus was so good at making truths so plain by using short stories. I sometimes picture ordinary folk being struck by his stories and then thinking for a long time about what Jesus had said. But this is the case throughout Scripture, and Genesis chapter 3 is one of those examples. So in this week's reading in Genesis chapter 3, it's one of those stories that's so full of meaning. It's the last part of the fall. In the first part, Satan tricks Eve into eating the forbidden fruit. And there are books and hours worth of lectures that explain what the story means, and rightly so. It's meant to be one of those stories, those short stories with endless meaning. So in short, the forbidden fruit is creating for ourselves what is good and evil on our own terms. When God is not the sovereign reference point, when He is not telling us what good and evil is, we have difficulty navigating good and evil. So we'll see that in as we go along. Satan used empathy to draw Eve in. Satan doesn't start off by flat out denying the Lord's injunction to stay away from the fruit. Instead, he comes across as caring and wanting the best for Adam and Eve. So in essence, Satan said to Eve, God is holding out on you. You'll benefit if you eat the forbidden fruit. Satan approached Eve empathically with the deliberate intention of stirring feelings that God was withholding from her. Immediately, they notice their nakedness. Sin immediately leads to self-awareness and then the inclination to hide. So the story is full of meaning, and I'll focus on that piece about the empathy in the Lord and in Satan. The Lord gives one instruction: don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And God knows the consequences when He gives that command. He also knew that it was necessary to give them free will. So deciding to love and to submit to the Lord and to one another is only possible when we have free will to do so. So again, the Lord found out that Adam and Eve had done wrong, and He cursed them. So I've heard objections to the Lord cursing what He loves. I'm sure you've heard it too. A loving God wouldn't. Put in what you need to. A loving God would absolutely give us free will. Love and meaning are only possible when we're free to choose. The Lord then made a promise that Eve's offspring will crush Satan's head. Before banishing Adam and Eve, He clothed them in animal skin. Both of these, the promise and the provision, are acts of kindness and faithfulness that result in Adam and his descendants increasingly flourishing. So, to contrast, Satan's empathy led to the fall. At its core, it made Adam and Eve feel as though they'd been cheated. They had not been cheated. Satan tried to make them want what was not theirs, and that's called coveting. Do not covet is the 10th commandment. Coveting leads to jealousy, resentment, cheating, stealing, arrogance, deception, and ultimately murder. We see all of these in the next big story. That is the story of Cain and Abel. So, because the Lord is just, He punished Adam and Eve for their actions. Their actions had resulted in their banishment, a strained relationship between husband and wife, a strained relationship with the land, and a constant battle between good and evil. When we do wrong, repeatedly, the social fabric will catch and hold us. Grace can endure wrongdoing, but not forever. The social fabric made of mutually trusting relationships in the service of flourishing twists and tears as a result of wrongdoing. So you can think of continuous lying or cheating or betrayal, what that does to a relationship. Doesn't end there. So the fall is a short story meant to convey a lot quickly. The curse is just. As much as a just God must condemn wrongdoing, bad outcomes are the inevitable, natural result of wrongdoing. Wrongdoing twists, tears, and breaks the social fabric between us. But because we have free will, we can repair what is broken. And that's, I think, the lesson of our faith and the lesson that we are taught by the Old Testament, that God's faithfulness, despite our wrongdoing, continues to nurture that relationship so that there is flourishing on our part. We can submit to one another. We can repair what is broken. So, the rest of Scripture is that fulfilling of the promise that the Lord made to Adam and Eve. And what happens is that there's that constant fulfilling. One of the things that we read earlier on this year was about how the people had rejected the promise of the promised land. And when they headed back into the wilderness, they were overcome by snakes, and some of them even died. And so Moses raises up a snake. And Jesus says of himself that he has to be raised up, and everyone who looked to the snake was healed, and everyone who looks to Jesus will be healed. That's what Jesus says, the fulfilling of that promise in Genesis chapter 3. He was lifted up, and all who believe in him, who look to him, will be saved. So I'm always encouraged when I look at the impact of the church, of men and women who look to Jesus. Men and women have built churches, schools, hospitals, universities, and these have led to flourishing individuals and communities. And I'm thankful that we can participate in that as a community of believers around about the world. So, Father, thank you for your promise and for the continuing and the incredible flourishing that we see. Amen.